unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What's up, everyone? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I'm here with my co-host, like always. Ian, how are you?
I'm doing really good.
So this is kind of where we get to the much easier portion of our schedule for the year. So we finished the regular season. We just had the conference championship games last weekend and the selection show where we saw the college football playoff teams. And now it's a lot easier for me and Ian because we have a lot less games that we have to watch and focus on. So with that being said, let's jump into it. So this week is we're going to look back at some of the college football playoff stuff. We'll just have a little discussion about what teams we thought should have got in, what not. And then we'll jump into the Heisman finalists and talk about who we think will win and maybe just discuss a little bit about each player a little bit as well. So let's jump into it. So the playoff selection was on Sunday, and we saw Notre Dame get left out. We saw BYU get left out. We saw Miami get in, and we saw Alabama get in. Those are the really only two surprises because by Saturday night at like 11:30, we knew that James Madison was going to get in because Duke was going to be too lowly rated of a conference champion. So
yeah,
James Madison gets in, Tulane gets in, and then obviously the rest of the other teams weren't in doubt. So Ian, do you feel, because I know we talked about it on Sunday, and I know I've felt this opinion like the most out of all of these, is that with devaluing the conference championship games, would it have been better to select Alabama and BYU to really like bolster the conference championship game because even in a loss, you still get in? Or do you feel like this was the right choice in selecting Miami and Alabama?
So it's funny because they literally made the decision that was going to tick everybody off because they double standard themselves with what the opinion is of making the conference championship. Because we saw last year SMU lost the in because they made it very adamant that losing the conference championship, you can only gain something by being in the conference championship, not lose something, which, okay, fine, fair. But what they decided to do was go against that.
Yeah.
BYU, they admit it or not, got punished for losing the Big 12 championship because I forget his name because I don't even bother to remember the name of somebody with that little knowledge. But I'm sorry, I'm not pulling punches with this.
No, I'm glad. Please do.
Because he said when they mentioned like, okay, BYU left out. Why? BYU lost to Texas Tech twice, both handedly. Okay, fine. Personally, like I said, if it was my bracket, I would have kept BYU in because their only two losses were to one of the best defenses in the.
Yeah.
With that, then they go to Bama, put Bama in, who also lost handedly to Georgia. Now the difference is, of course, they beat Georgia
before.
They beat them before. So I can understand that notion. But in the same instance, they lost handedly to Georgia, barely beating teams. They have not won a top 25 game in 7 weeks. And all of the teams they have played have been either one score or very late heroics that they only beat teams like South Carolina. They beat they had to go down to the wire to Auburn. They lost to Oklahoma. And then I know I'm sounding like a broken record here. They lost to Florida State by 2 touchdowns. That is not even going to a bowl game.
Right.
They technically were given a choice to go to a bowl game, but they're too good for that too. I'm sorry, tangent. Regardless, what it's saying is pretty much is we don't even know is what the playoff committee. They had the standard SEC bias and stuff like that. And while you can make the argument that, yes, the SEC is still probably the toughest conference, and maybe that was the notion they came with, was that, hey, maybe an SEC team doing this is tougher than a Big 12 team. That would have been fine if they admitted it, but they didn't. They just went against what he literally said. We're saying Bama shouldn't get punished for going to the conference championship, but we're leaving BYU out because they lost twice to Texas Tech. Even if they didn't go to the conference championship, there's a good shot they would have been in. So, and they said too, BYU dropping out opened the spot for Miami. I thought, look, either you do this, you go all in or all out. You either say, okay, look, how you lose the conference championship matters, because you could make that argument too. How BYU and Alabama lost was very different from how SMU lost last year, because SMU was down to the wire. So they could have been like, look, SMU had a good fight against Clemson, couldn't punish them for that. Alabama and BYU, I'm sorry, you got your butts served to you in a platter. You're going to have to be dropped out for that. And then they put in Notre Dame and Miami. But instead, they did the worst of both options, where they put in Miami, leave out Notre Dame, and Alabama stays in. Alabama did not drop a spot at all, which is, again, I am just baffled by that, considering all the moving parts. I feel like, yes, we're going to a point where you're not going to need conference. Well, here's the thing. You still do need conference championships because the conferences are too big now. It's not like how it used to, like, there was the argument that, we go back to how we used to with, like, how the Big Ten used to decide, where you just have whoever had the best record at the end of the regular season. And I was like, yeah, but you don't have 10 teams anymore. You have 16 in a 12-game schedule. It's impossible. So, yes, you're devaluing, and I don't know if you're going to move away from conference championships because you still need them. But the notion and how to determine how important a conference championship game is, the playoff committee needs to just straight up say, look, you going in to a conference championship won't hurt you. Or you are putting, it's a risk reward thing. Kind of like how it used to be in the 2000s, where with the BCS Bowl, where if you did lose the conference championship, that could hurt you. Or if you won it, that could boost you up. The 06 Gators, the reason they got in over Michigan was because they beat Arkansas in the SEC championship. So that could be the notion that they could go with like, yes, you could gain something, but also lose something. You're rolling the dice with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was just like, again, my reaction from that was it's one thing to have like that happen where like an injustice, but to be like told to your face, like to be lied to, like, that just ticked me off to no one. But that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, because it's like up until this year, we've always had it to where like there was like respect for the fact that you even lost the championship. Just getting to conference championship games did not hurt anyone as far as like even bowl value, because it was seemingly like even if you lost your conference championship game, you still went to a New Year's Six bowl in years past. So I don't know. I mean, it's something where it's like, obviously they're trying to navigate this. This is only the second year of the 12-team playoff. So they're trying to figure this out, trying to like make criteria for why these teams get in. I mean, Notre Dame is really mad. Like, they backed out of a bowl game and were not happy with what happened. And I don't blame them, because, they went on a tear after those 2 losses, and they barely lost those games. They lost by like, I think like a combined like 4 or 5 points or something like that. And so like, they're one of the better teams in the country, clearly. But Miami is right up there with them. So it's like, I don't know. I think I had said before on Sunday, if it was between those 4 teams, either you keep Alabama and BYU to respect the conference championship games, or you don't have either. Because I think having one or the other then shows bias and towards the SEC, which clearly they're doing here. Like, this is not like, it's not even like hidden anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, what is there, 5 teams in the playoff from the SEC? Like
Bama, Georgia, Texas, or not Texas A&M, Oklahoma,
Ole Miss.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah. So there's 5 teams. So like, like I love the SEC. I think it's probably one of the best conferences in the country, and it's been that like way for like 20 years. But at the same time, I want objectivity in the sport, and I want fairness. And I don't know. I know people like, oh well, if we keep expanding, whatever, they're just going to keep expanding. But I feel like if we get to like around 16 teams, I think those other teams like on that like cusp that are like 20 to 16, I think they're not going to be as angry, but maybe they will be. I don't know. It seems with basketball, the teams that are like on the cusp still get upset anyways. So I guess we'll just always have this problem. No matter how large the tournament is, there's always going to be someone complaining that they got left out, regardless of what the number is. So maybe we're just going to play this dance for eternity, like
My thought of
yeah.
how to somewhat remedy this, and I know this makes it a lot harder for the group of fives, but not impossible, is you instead of you do the auto bids of conference champions, is that you have the top 12 teams just in general. You have
Yeah.
your top 12 teams, and 9 times out of 10, your conference champions are in that top 12.
Yeah.
So then, you don't have to worry about this. Now, like I said, that makes it a bit harder for group of 5 teams, but if a group of 5 team is having a really good season, they will have to try to. Well, the other problem is too is that James Madison didn't get ranked until the ranking reveal before this one. So, but that was my thought of like how you remedy this is like you have your top 12, and most of the time your conference champions are in it regardless.
Yeah.
But that was just that was my thing. My original idea was like you just go to 8. But they took it they 4 times 4'd it with the 14 bracket.
I honestly feel like 16 is probably the sweet spot because you then can include like a couple of group of 5 teams, and then you'll have the majority of the good quality teams up to like possibly the top 12. So then it's like, that's a good amount of teams. I don't think really anyone's going to have any complaint. If you're not good enough to make that, that's your fault. And I mean, the one thing that I've seen though bandied about is like including all of the group of 5 champions, which I honestly don't really have a problem with, because I feel like if we're going to do this like similar to the basketball tournament, that's what the basketball tournament does. They include all champions and then the at-large teams, which maybe they'd have to go to like 20 teams. So like if that's the case, then you have, the 10 champions, or is it? Yeah, it's 4 or 5, and then the Pac-12 or whatever it will be. So the 10 champions and then 10 at large. And I think honestly that probably is the best right there. Like 10 and 10, just 10 at large, 10 champions, and play the best. And then that way also you have a lot of the like Power 4 teams playing these group of 5s. And so then we'll actually see like, are these group of 5s better off or whatever? And like we can get an actual answer, and it'll be very similar to the basketball tournament. And it's very similar to the FCS and like what the other lower divisions do. They have, a tournament with like 22, 24 teams or whatever it is. Like, this is just what you do. Like, I don't see why. I mean, obviously, we've advanced the sport immensely in the last 12 years. Like, from where we were before the BC, like before the 14 playoff, we were in a BCS mold, and it, like, I'm sorry, it was not fair, and it was very anti-competitive, and it was basically violating antitrust. Yep. And so they had to find a way to figure this out. They went to a 14 playoff. It kind of worked, kind of whatever. And then they realized they could advance it even more. And I knew they would. I mean, I've been hopeful for a long time that they would advance to a playoff. a larger playoff. And they did. They got 12 teams with on-campus games, which everyone loved, and they're going to love it even more this coming weekend, next weekend when, they're on Oregon and they're on campus at Oklahoma and they're on campus at Texas A&M. Those are going to be crazy environments.
Yeah.
Like, people are going to be super stoked for those games, and rightfully they should be. And, I think people just, they have those like graduation goggles where they look back, and then nostalgia really kind of blinds their ability to like weigh the pros and cons of something effectively, because they look at things like, oh, that was so great, I loved how it was, but in the BCS era there was only like 3 or 4 teams that actually had a shot at getting to the championship game. So like, was it fair? Like, so basically, 95% of the country for the teams had no shot. Like, I'm sorry, now, like we've said, the top 25 is legitimately in play to get to the playoff. That makes excitement all the way to the very end of the season until Selection Sunday. Like, Miami had no idea. At that point, Miami, for the last couple of weeks, did not know they were getting in. They felt like they were not probably going to get in. Most people like had that thought. And then to Selection Sunday, they changed their mind and they flip-flopped Notre Dame and Miami, and it changed. So this is why the sport's compelling. I'm not caring about the stupid shows, the ranking shows, whatever.
Yeah.
Those can just shove off. I do not care about those. I have no interest. The only thing I ever do when those rankings get released, I look up online or I look up on Twitter and I'll look what teams are there, and I don't need to see a show about nothing. I can watch Seinfeld all I want, and I'll watch a show about nothing that's actually hilarious and compelling, because that show, the CFP ranking reveal shows, are not compelling and not interesting, and they're just a waste of everyone's time, and they're kind of ruining the sport. But, as far as getting to a larger playoff, I think that's the mold. And as well, we talked about with Seth Varnador, getting to more on-campus games. I think the sport loves on-campus games. It feeds off that. The energy at these home stadiums makes this sport so much better. If we're spending, 4, 2, 3, 7 games away from these campuses, it's kind of like ruining the mystique, the aura of these games. So let's get back to more on-campus games as much as we can. If anything, I'd love it to have, the first round, the quarterfinals, and then those be on-campus games, and then maybe have the semifinals and finals be
bowl games.
Have those bowl games. And you could, honestly, what they really should do, and a lot of people have talked about it, just make the Rose Bowl the championship game.
Yeah.
And don't even rotate anymore. Like, I get they probably make some money off of the negotiations and the bidding for that location, but it kind of is whatever, it doesn't have any specialness to college football. The Rose Bowl is nothing but college football, and that is the mecca of all locations for college football. So I think we should definitely kind of highlight that and move that forward. Do you have any more thoughts before we go on, team wise, anything that you could think of what we were that just to talk about before we get into the Heisman stuff?
I mean, I would say the only other thing I would off is, like I mentioned, one way I would do is top 12 in general. And it's interesting too, because a lot of people are saying with a lot of these teams opting out and stuff that, the whole bowl system is dying. And I don't know. I feel like there's always going to be some teams that would this is giving the door open to smaller teams that, may not get a chance as often to go to a bowl game. And now they're getting that chance because these bigger guys just don't want to do it. It is really weird. We're used to the NFL ready guys opting out, but I do find it ironic that you're just seeing teams flat out say, I don't want to go to a bowl game. I get where Notre Dame's coming from, but I'm like, guys, come on. Like, that's how you want your seniors to leave, is on that note, not even a chance to, play it out on the field. That was just my 2 cents. I still feel like if you get a bowl game, it still, I mean, I'm still of the belief that going to a bowl game is a big deal for whatever school it is. I mean, it depends on the bowl, but like for me, for example, as a USF fan, it's still really cool to see them go to like the Cure Bowl in Orlando. It was a big deal. We rushed to the field at the Boca Raton Bowl because we hadn't won a bowl game since 2017. Yeah. So these games still matter, and if the big schools aren't going to, care, then that leaves the door open for these group of 5 schools to show how much, it really does matter to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the bowl game system, I think it's an antiquated thing from from a lot of why it is what it is. The bowl system is because of they were advertisements for these locales. So there was a way to get people to look at California, to look at Florida, to look at Texas, and be like, hey, come visit this place when, it's much colder in the Midwest and the Northeast. And, get these teams down here. And like, it's a way to, advertise these areas for tourism. And, I feel like it may be just something of the past that we go away from. And I don't feel like it's that big of a deal if we lose it. People might get upset because it's tradition, whatever, man. Like, this sport has always been different than every other sport for whatever reason in the entirety of all of sports. Like literally no other sport has a exhibition game after the end of the season that means nothing. None of them do.
Yeah.
So like, why are we doing this? Like, I get that it was done for over 100 years, but that doesn't mean we have to continue that. Like, it's not like, I think it's just, again, it's nostalgia. It's what we did in the past, so we have to keep doing it. That doesn't mean just because something is wrong and you've done it forever doesn't mean that you have to keep doing it. Sometimes there's moments when you have to look up and be like, I need to make a change. This needs to be different, and if worst case scenario, if they do a playoff system that is more inclusive with all the champions and like a bunch of at-larges, you could potentially do an NIT of those those like other teams that want to do a tournament. Like, why not? I don't blame them for that. That would actually be compelling as well, because that's more football. And you could do like all the teams that are like, everywhere from like 5 and 7 all the way up to like, 8 and 4. Like all those teams get involved in a tournament themselves. And then it's like, if you win that, you get like, I don't know, like an automatic spot in the next term. I don't know, just something like that gives them something to compete for, instead of, I don't know, a bowl game that means nothing, that goes nowhere. It's literally, it gives them extra practice, and they get a lot of free stuff, and the sponsors of the bowl game make money off of it. That's great. I understand that they're trying to make money, but at the same time, I want what's better for the sport, and what's better for the sport is a playoff that's more representative of the teams that are involved. And right now we're not really there. I think we're close to getting there. And once we get there, I think the sport will be better off. Again, more teams involved. If you get those MAC schools involved, think about how, like, a playoff spot, if that's on the line in the MAC championship game, do you know how competitive those kids are going to be?
Yeah.
Those kids are going to work their butts off to get that. And that makes the sport that much better. I'm sorry, but like, I'm trying to improve the sport, and, I want to see it get better. I feel like it's getting there slowly but surely. Things take time. They see the ratings. The ratings are literally through the roof for the last 20 years. These are like some of the highest ratings we've seen. The Big Ten championship game was the highest ever rated conference championship game ever. So like, clearly this stuff is working. It is compelling. So I want it to continue. I think it can and will. We spent 25 minutes on that. Let's jump into the Heisman finalists and we'll call it a show. Ian, I want to hear your thoughts. What are you thinking with this? Because I got the stats list. I always fail this. The stats listed. No, you're the opposite way. Opposite way, Ian.
We're there?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
All right.
So the stats are here. We've got it listed. I'll just run through the stats real quick, just if you can't see it. So for Fernando Mendoza, the quarterback for Indiana, he has for his passing stats, he has 2,980 yards. So he's 20 away from 3,000, pretty close. It's pretty standard barrier, the 3,000 yard mark. He has 33 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 71.5 completion percentage, which is really good. He also had 240 rushing yards and 6 TDs. So he's got 39 total TDs, which is a really good number. You know, usually a Heisman winner has around 40 plus TDs. Really good ones have 50 plus, but a good one is usually around 40 TDs. Diego Pavia for quarterback for Vanderbilt. He is passed for 3,192 yards, 27 TDs, 8 interceptions. He also has a similar completion percentage in 71.2%. But he has on his side the rushing stats, which are 826 yards, 9 TDs, 5.5 yard average per rush, which is really good for a quarterback. Jeremiah Love, running back, Notre Dame. His rushing stats include 1,372 yards, 18 TDs, 6.9 yard average per carry. That's really good. Receiving 27 receptions, 280 yards, 3 TDs. And last but not least, Julian Sayin, quarterback for Ohio State. Doesn't have any rushing stats that are really applicable because he has no touchdowns and -2 yards, but his passing stats are quite good. 3,323 yards, 31 TDs, 6 interceptions, and a whopping 78.4 completion percentage. Before that game on Saturday, he was flirting with the NCAA record for completion percentage. So that's how accurate he was heading into Saturday's game, which, credit to Indiana's defense, he kind of held them out. Now, Ian, out of all those stats, who do you think favors out of all that?
For me, if it was my decision, if I had to make mine, it would be for Mendoza. On the basis, I know really right now the argument has been Mendoza or Sayin, and when I stress this, I am not disrespecting Sayin at all, but I feel like it's a different class with Sayin. Sayin is undoubtedly a fantastic quarterback.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, too, he does have the best wide receivers in the country with Jeremiah Smith, Tate, those guys to throw to. And I'm not saying it makes it any easier, but it does make it in those 50-50 situations. He knows Jeremiah Smith can bully whatever 5'9", 5'10" corner they have covering him and just throw it out there, and he knows he's going to come down with it. That's not on Sayin. That's him just being a smart quarterback. And I think that's the thing, too. I think out of all of the quarterbacks and players in the country, Sayin is definitely, I think, the most Peyton Manning, football knowledge-esque. He knows very rarely made mistakes. The 2 interceptions he threw when it was the one against Michigan and the one against Indiana early, after that, he didn't throw a single, risky, shall we say, pass. But Mendoza, and again, not that Indiana has any bad wide receivers or anything like that. Same thing with Pavia and those guys. But I felt like Mendoza was able to do more for his team than maybe Sayin would. Same thing with Pavia. Pavia, I said, was probably my number 2 choice because my basis is if you take them away from their team, how well do they do? And I felt like if you took Pavia away from Vandy, I'm not saying they're back to the Vanderbilt we know, but I think it would be a bit of a difference. Same thing with Jeremiah Love, too. Jeremiah Love is the best running back right now in the country. He leads in rushing stats in total, average yards per carry, even with the injury. Yeah. But if I had to take the pick, it would be Mendoza for the fact of he may not have had the elite level weapons Sayin had, but also, too, in the games that they played, where, like, for example, when I was doing the homework,
Yeah.
when, between the teams like Illinois, Penn State, and those Washington, I think was the other one. 20 Washington was 20th ranked overall defense. Penn State was 34th overall ranked defense and 72nd passing, and Illinois was 35th against passing, 51st defense. And Mendoza had better stats against those teams than Sayin. Now, credit might be a bit skewed because some of those games Sayin was taken out early because they were up so much. But in the games that matter, like the example of the Penn State game, I know it's a bit of a double entendre because Ohio State blew out Penn State. But when it came down to the wire, Mendoza found a way to win. He was able to will his team to the win, throwing those passes. Same thing with guys like, man, you want to talk about a guy who will just run through a brick wall. Pavia was that guy for Vanderbilt. He did everything he possibly could to win the game. And I think Pavia was the most athletic and dynamic of this group because he could beat you with his legs and he could beat you with his arm. The only thing that was holding him back, and I know it's not like he doesn't have a lot of interceptions as he did the year before, but there were some risky passes that he maybe shouldn't have thrown. But it's one of those things. It's like the whole Brett Favre thing. You live by the gunslinger, you die by the gunslinger. But when you hit those home run balls, they hit. Regardless, is a long-winded way of me saying still, I think if I was to give the Heisman Trophy, it would be to Mendoza because he leads the country in touchdown passes. He's, records can be a bit skewed, but with this Indiana team, you have to give him credit for that. They have one of the most prolific offenses we've seen, especially this season, and he is a big reason for it. And whenever they needed a big play, a big pass, something like that, he came in when it mattered.
Yeah, and I'll just put on it, specifically, he had the Heisman moments.
Yes.
Out of anyone in the list, I think Pavia had some moments where he was the reason they won games for Vanderbilt. But, some of those teams were kind of not that great. And, Mendoza had the great pass to Cooper at the end of the Penn State game, but Penn State was kind of a whatever team. But then you have the Ohio State moments where he had that big pass to Becker, and it's dude, that moment right there in the biggest spot, the number one versus number two, playing up against another quarterback who is going up against for the Heisman, and he had the moment, and I think that right there stands out more than anything. Always talk about that. It's stats are pretty similar with all these guys. They're not because Pavia has 36 touchdowns total, and Fernando has 39 total, and then Julian has 31, and then Jeremiah Love has 21. So they're all good numbers. They're not it's not where it's the Tebow or Cam Newton year or Johnny Manziel year or Lamar Jackson year where all four of those guys had 50 plus touchdowns or whatever. And that was the difference is they had a remarkable distance between the next guy. I think all these guys are relatively even. I think the biggest difference is Mendoza has those moments, and that'll be what made him stand out. And I mean, it was clear on Saturday. People talked about it. It was I think he won the Heisman on that play, literally making that completion to win them the game. That was the moment. That was it. And he did it. And he came it was third down. They could have just run the ball and punted and hope their defense holds them. But no, Cignetti had the forethought of and the courage and the huevos to take it on. And he did. And he's let's go for this. And it was an excellent play call. And Mendoza, masterfully completed it. His deep balls were tremendous all game. And and that was just a culmination of that. So I think this year, as things were going on, people were underwhelmed by these guys, but I'm not. I think it's always one of those things where it's I think people expect one or two guys to really outpace the other. And if it doesn't happen, then people feel it's a disappointing year. But these are 4 excellent candidates. And even like Rodriguez from Texas Tech, the linebacker, is an excellent candidate. And he probably should have just been the 5th guy. I don't know why they just didn't throw him a bone and bring him on. I think it's like certain like voting levels you have to meet the criteria to be selected to go to New York. But I will say with Rodriguez, he was kind of like missing in action on Saturday against BYU. It was really the other linebacker that stood out. So is what it is. They're an excellent defense, Texas Tech. So that's seems like what's going to happen. Some guys are going to feast more than others. Rodriguez was feasting all year. He just didn't happen to feast in the biggest game of the year so far. But I don't know. I like Mendoza a ton. I feel like that moment he shined through. He did what he needed to do. And I feel like he's going to win, and you feel like he's going to win. So I honestly, I think it's going to be pretty anticlimactic, but he deserves it. And we'll move on from there. Sunday, we will not have a show because there's not really much to talk about. We know Mendoza is going to win it. So we will have a show Wednesday to preview the college football playoff games. And those will occur on Friday night, one of the games, and then 3 games on Saturday. So we will talk about that stuff on Wednesday. You can reach us at haterradio.com for all of our articles. There's one on Scott Strickland. Ian really went to town on him. And then you can reach us at our socials. Just type in Hater Radio, comes right up. Ian, what are your socials before we go?
At Twitter, it's at G5Gibson, and at YouTube and Instagram, it's at G_Gator_G.
All right, that is the show, everyone. Thank you for this great season. We're going to continue into the playoffs here next week, and then we'll finish it off for, I think it's like 4 weeks, and then that's it.
Yep.
So enjoy these games. We'll talk to you on Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. All right, take care, y'all.